The place is so big that you don't want to immediately just try to look at one thing. You want to soak it all in. You want to have the experience of you're walking from Greece and then suddenly you're in Africa and suddenly you're in the modern arts and looking at Picasso's. Because it just reminds you how big the world is and how full and how diverse. And quiet your mind, feel like you're lying on the grass looking up at the nighttime stars, that you're just small in this world that's so large and so wondrous.
So thank you for being with us, and it's an honor for me to lead our interview with Korean audience.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a delight being here, meeting you all.
Before we start my questions, I'd like to listen your introduction for this interview.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you very much. That's very kind. I tried to write a book that was about the experience of art. There are a lot of books that are about art, about schools and styles, and about art history and scholarship. But there aren't a lot of books, I think, that are about what it's like to stand in front of something and feel that it's beautiful and have some sense of its meaning, but not a complete sense. There's a little bit of mystery there. And to do that sort of day in and day out in all different places all around the world within this one building, seeing Korean art and then art from West Africa and then art from ancient Greece. And I wrote the book because I wanted to write a story about what it's like from a subjective viewpoint to be with these things. And I realized that in order to write this story, I would have to be writing my story too, because I would have to explain where I was coming from, why I had come to this museum, why I was having the experiences I'm having. And eventually I realized, I'm going to have to write about my brother and about loss, and all of those different threads that you mentioned are really going to have to weave together. Because the art inside an art museum is about all of that stuff. It's about life and death and beauty and meaning and suffering and all of those things. So we bring those experiences to the art. So I think it made sense to try to write a book that would touch on each of those in turn.
Okay, this is your book. When I looked at your book, this book was published on February
2023.
2023 February, amazing. So this book soon became a high-ranking chart of some bestseller. So congratulations, and
thank you.
also this book translated in Korean or other languages. So before we came this room, this is the third edition in Korean. So amazing story. So working as a museum guard is one thing you had for 10 years, and preparing, writing, or publishing a book is quite another. So what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, well, I knew that when I was working at the museum that I had an interesting point of vantage as a guard. I was sort of invisible, standing in the corner, and can watch all of these things. And I had all this time to sort of think about things in all different kinds of ways, because a guard is outside the normal sort of hustle and flow of life. So it occurred to me years into the process that I should write about this because it's something that hasn't really been expressed before. And I got serious about trying to write the book, and then I found an agent, and he helped me shape the idea a little bit, and then I had an editor who helped, and it's just been such a delight and such a surprise how it's rocketed all around the world, and in particular in Korea, which I got to go to in February. It's been such a success that for me it's so fun because I get to meet all of these readers and get to see these places.
So that is exactly when? So you decide to write about your book. So
Maybe about 6 or 7 years in to being a guard, but my first idea for a book was to write a guard's guide to the Met. That was my first idea, a sort of a guidebook. But then I realized working on that it was sort of interesting, but it didn't kind of have a heart to it, a sort of center to it that a story would have. So I decided to try to write my story instead and try to make it a memoir.
You mentioned about the beginning when you prepared this book. You wrote the book for the gods.
Or
the guide for the normal people.
It was a guide for anybody, but written from a guard's perspective. That was my first idea. So it would be about the art, but also have interesting details about how the Met works and the backstage stuff, and then also over things I overheard from visitors and funny stories and things like that. That was my idea.
So as you know, when I went to the museum, the book store, there is the museum guidebook. It's some kinds of the collection of the image of artwork, and then they give this some description.
Yeah.
That is the Met guidebook.
Yes.
That is very dry.
Yes.
So you wanted to do different way to bring the other backstory or something like
Yes, that was my first idea.
Okay. So your book reflects on artworks and how they connect to our life. So what's your intention to help ordinary people, the Black visitors, relate the artwork to their life?
I think that when a lot of visitors look at artworks in the Met, they read the little labels and they think that there's a curator upstairs who has the correct answers to whatever the meaning of this is, and they're experts. And because we're not experts, we have to keep an arm's length, and we can't fully engage with the arts. And I think that that's not a good way to look at it, because I think that this art is often about things that we ourselves have experience with. They're often about life and death and suffering and what it means to live in this mysterious world and what it feels like and the wondrous parts of it and the mysterious parts of it. And we can look at those objects from just sort of an art historical perspective, but we don't have to. If Rembrandt is painting a portrait, he's looking at a real human being and he's having feelings about this real human being. And we can also be looking at that person and trying to see the way Rembrandt sees, or we could be thinking about the way that we see if we turn to our loved one, or if I look at you, or whatever it is. That art can be it can open us up to the sheer, the visual splendor of things.
Oh, that is my feeling. I felt you deeply attuned very small moment in life. So that is a kind of the Zen awakening. That is not exactly religious sense, but that is the way of the being alive in each moment. So that is very important. So would you explain that, or when you bring some example when you feel like that at the museum?
Sure. I think that there are these moments in life where we suddenly kind of stop what we're doing and we feel alive to a moment, and we feel it's the presence of things and the strangeness of things and maybe the majesty of the whole universe. We get these sort of flashes of that. And I think that art oftentimes is about that because the artist themselves has had that feeling and they are trying to translate it to us. If Monet is looking at his water lilies, he is sort of almost vibrating with a sense of them, and he's trying to transmit those kind of vibrations to us. And I think that can very much happen in an art museum, and it's important. It does have almost a spiritual dimension to it, because a lot of life is just having your head down, doing what you need to do, picking up your phone, checking your email and everything else. but there are these moments that feel sacred. And the word sacred, the English word at least, at its root, it means set apart. You know, set apart from the ordinary, set apart.
Oh, set apart. Yeah.
From the ordinary everyday life, and you have these set apart things that are somehow feel higher or more essential or more basic. And art itself can feel like that, almost like a sacred object, but it can also lead us to feel like things out in the world are like that, to find things that feel sacred to us, even if it's a tree out our window or something.
So sacred also happened with our ordinary life too.
Sure.
Can you bring some example or some artists? Normally when you go to museum, we look at artwork. Another way you explain that in your book, not only look at artwork, we need experience about artwork. Can you describe what is the experience, not look at just to see?
Sure. I mean, I think an artist wants to create a sense of something in you. You know, if art is just a piece of canvas or just a hand scroll, it's just material things. When it becomes alive, it needs an observer to make it alive. It's almost like you're collaborating with the artist to create a feeling of aesthetic wonder in you, or of beauty, or of a sense of meaning, or whatever it is. It needs you to help it feel those things. And I sometimes use the analogy of laughter, that if something's funny, we know that it's funny because we laugh. It evokes a response in us. I think things that are beautiful also evoke a response in us. It's just a sort of quieter response. But it's something that we can feel at our chest. Maybe sometimes it makes us sort of shake our heads in disbelief. But we can get better at recognizing that feeling in ourselves and making room for it and making space for it. And I think art can help us do that. And if we learn how to do that, then we help the art, because we let it do its job of making us feel its beauty.
You said we can help to the artwork?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Rembrandt, for instance, he paints something that's very, very beautiful. But if you look at it without effort or without openness or without your heart, then it's just fine. It's a pretty picture or whatever. But if you spend the time and you really look at it, maybe skillfully or maybe just openly and generously and patiently, it becomes a greater painting. I mean, without question.
So, kinds of the 한국말에서 내가 꽃을 보고 이름을 불러주니까 너가 내게 다가왔다. 되게 그것과 비슷한 상황인 것 같아요. So, in some Korean poem, I call your name and then you come to me. Like that, when you look at the artwork and then give your attention and then sharing your feeling with artwork, the artwork responds to you. That kind of meaning is the experience about art.
Yeah, yes. Somebody said that the real art happens in between the subject and the object. It's sort of a creation that you two collaborate to create. And I think that's certainly true, because if I look at a piece of art and you look at a piece of art and you look at one, we're all looking at a different piece in some sense, because we all are having a different experience of it. And we can all work to get better at our experience of it, to be a little bit more open or a little bit more imaginative with the way we see. Mm-hmm. And it helps Rembrandt be the best painter he can be, certainly.
So my experience, we met at the Met the day I brought the Korean tourists to came to New York, and they look around the Metropolitan Museum because they might be influenced by you.
Oh, great.
So I brought them to Egypt section. So Egypt art, as you mentioned about in your book, modern 2000. No, they happened at 2500 BC. That means more than 5,400 years ago. That kind of the time distance. But one of the work you might remember the work the Royal Acquaintance Mami and Shabu. Do you remember that?
Say that again?
The Royal Acquaintance Mami and Shabu. Edge section.
Okay.
There's men and women together. They like it's small size, and the man put his hand on his wife's breast like that, and wife hold his husband's waist. Very lovely scene. So when I looked at, it's very beyond. You mentioned about timeless. When you see the artwork, it's that we can connect with the artwork. It's like timeless. That is the 45,000 years ago. I'm standing in front of the artwork. It's present time, but beyond the time, we can make connected. So, can you bring that kind of experience at the museum?
Sure. Yes, I think one wonderful thing about art is, say if I'm looking at Korean art, sometimes when I look at it, it might seem very different and very strange because it's very old and it's from a different culture that is not my culture, and it can feel distant, and that can be interesting, the difference, and I might feel like I, can't penetrate it in some way. But then something in your mind will flip sometimes, and you'll think, well, but this was made by a human being, and I'm a human being, and we have more things in common than we have that separate us. We're part of the same species. We live and we die, and we see the sun rise, and we see our surroundings. And I say to myself, well, I'm just going to do the best that I can to engage with this artwork, fully, and see what I can make of it. And you can do the same thing with the ancient Egyptians. In some ways, it's a very, very strange culture, and that is interesting and exciting, and you can learn from that. But you can also approach it as an expression of a species that you belong to and I belong to and the ancient Egyptians do. And that can be quite exciting and make you feel almost proud of your species.
Okay, that's your experience. It's very important. I'd like to make next question. You visited Korea last February, so you had a chance to see Korean artwork in Korean museum, and also Metropolitan Museum. There is Korean gallery. So can you compare your feeling? Same work, not really the same work. Some Korean work in here in New York Metropolitan Museum was some Korean artwork in the Korean homeland context. Can you feel differences between same Korean artwork in different locations, different connections surrounding?
Yeah, sure. Oh, I had a wonderful time visiting the National Museum of Korea. I spent the whole day, and I spoke to some of the guards, of course, which was fun. But they have this wonderful exhibition there. I don't know if you've been there recently, where they have these two bodhisattvas that are really prized cultural treasures. I think they're from the 10th century or the 9th century. And they have just the two in this huge gallery. And to get to that gallery, you have to sort of follow a tunnel. And then they're just alone, and they're beautifully lit, and the floor is sort of sloping upward. And there's no signage around where you're meant to read about these things. You're just meant to be with them. You're meant to be with them in silence and have this full experience before you can wend your way out through a tunnel on the way out. And I thought that was wonderful. It was a wonderful way to experience art, not just in the clutter of a museum where there's a million things around, but sort of isolate them, make them sacred a little bit, like I said before. So that was wonderful. And then it was just wonderful seeing, I went into Bukhansan Park and saw some Buddhist temples there. And the scenery, of course, is so essential to the Korean architecture. And even the scenery through the windows of the building is essential to the architecture. So that was wonderful in terms of being in the place itself and having a sense of how the landscape connects to these things. It makes it feel very rooted.
So, but how about the Metropolitan Museum?
Yeah.
The small size of the Korean gallery.
Yeah.
They present the Korean oldest ceramics or turned to celadon or porcelain other things.
Yeah.
So that is make all kinds of the example or model of the Korean, what is Korean art.
Yes.
So compare with the real Korean art in Korea and Met. So do you think the Korean gallery near the Metropolitan Museum, they will very well present the sense of Korean art?
Yeah, I think, like you said, the Korean gallery at the Met is small, so it gives you a taste. It gives you a taste, but very beautifully done, I think. The Met has, beautiful moon jars, and of course those are so evocative because, it's the aesthetics of those and how they're a little bit imperfect. That's not something that we necessarily understand, but they're such a perfect kind of emblem of something that's happening in Korea and something that so much thought and sort of almost a philosophical tradition has gone into. So I feel like when I'm in the Met Galleries, it just makes me excited to go and see more and learn more.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Tell us more about the conversation you did with Korean National Gallery's The Gods.
Yeah.
As you mentioned.
Yeah, I couldn't find one that spoke much English. So I didn't have long conversations, but just the people at the entrances, and I was just saying hello, and I had a Korean version of my book, and I was saying that I worked in New York, and they found that interesting. But yeah, I wish I had had more. I didn't have my translator with me. I had a translator during events I did at bookstores and everything, which was wonderful, but I didn't have it at the museum.
I was wondering because most of the Korean museum, they're like part-timers, like they work for less than a year. So,
Oh, I see.
so maybe it's quite a big difference as you work for a very long time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's different. Interesting.
So I was like,
Yeah, I'd like to go back. I was meant to give a talk at the museum, but it didn't work out because of scheduling with Kyobo Books and stuff. So hopefully I'll get to go back at some point and talk at the museum.
Great, yeah.
미술 쪽은 아니고요. 그 어떤 책을 쓰고 이렇게 또 월드스타가 될 정도의 책을 쓰면 뭔가 우리하고 좀 다를 것 같은 그런 느낌 있잖아요. 그런데 책 속에 보면 아이를 데리고 이제 육아 기간에 아이를 데리고 탈출하듯이 나가서 그 어떤 자유를 느꼈던 그 대목에 제가 평범한 사람이었구나. 그런데 이렇게 해냈구나 이런 생각을 하게 됐어요. 근데 이제 미술관에서 일을 하게 된 그 어쩌면 저 뒤쪽으로 가보면 엄마가 어렸을 때 이제 자주 경험을 시켜주잖아요. 너무 자연스럽게 패트릭 가자 이렇게 하는데 지금 그 아이들이 지금 우리 아이들로 보면 한 사춘기쯤 되어 있을 것 같은데
10살하고
네.
12살이 아까 물어봤어요.
그런데 지금 잘 크고 있는지 또 어떤 그 엄마 아빠가 해주는 것처럼 지금 패트릭은 아이들에게 또 어떤 경험을 주고 있는지 물어보고 싶었어요.
Yeah. She made a so beautiful question to you because now you are a kind of the international very well-known writer also of this book. So normally we could think you are not ordinary people, you are a little different from normal people, but in your book you present your life, especially when your children, they are so young, you have not easy time to take care of the little one. So when you go to work, like escape from them. So anyway, that is something that she mentioned about that. And then another thing is you also mentioned about your experience, how you can get closer with the art because of your mother when you were young. They took you to that time Chicago, and also in the book you mentioned about when he was 11 years old, first time you visited the Metropolitan Museum. So I think you mentioned about your mother and your father's some experience to involved in the art world. Writing. So, how about you right now for your children? You do something for your children to read the museum to get closer with artworks?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yes, I try to bring just one of my children at a time places. I like to split my children because I find that if I just take one of them, we can have a sort of special experience, the two of us, and sort of slow themselves down a little bit and not be just in the same kind of family dynamic where they're arguing with their sister or whatever, but just the two of us and bring them to the museum, or my daughter loves dance and we go to that ballet or something, and really feel like they take the lead and say, you know, find at the museum something that interests you, and that they can have the sort of experiences that I think you need. You need to be outside the just kind of normal rhythm of life. So I guess that's one thing I do with the kids.
So you focus on I just first part let me make a clear understand. So you bring when you want to museum?
Yes, I like to go on dates with one of my kids. I find that that's fun, like just, and it feels more special to them.
My art history professor, he mentioned about it when he studied in Europe. He had two daughters. He wanted to bring to them to museum, but normally when children they are young, they run around and make some noise, then always he said, be quiet, and said to them, and then they hate to go to the museum. That kind of someday they like to go to museum with you.
Yeah. Some days they do. Yeah.
Yeah, they're too young. Any other questions?
Can I ask a question? First of all, I'm so sorry about your loss of your brother.
Thank you.
And I guess nobody told you. Yeah. But I want to know, I understand you were met as a God for 10 years, right? And through reading some page of your book, I realized your main focus is beauty. So you titled your book, All the Beauty in the World. I really like it. And I understand what you want to tell us. And I want to know, is there any big difference between your perception of beauty when you started your job there and right now? Well, what is your perception of beauty?
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, no, that's a big question, right? I called the book All the Beauty in the World because on the one hand, it's something we understand that the Met is a place that tries to collect beauty from all different places in the world, from Korea and from Egypt and Rome and West Africa and Cambodia and everywhere else. But also the book is about life, and it's about the people inside the museum and the 500 guards in the museum. And it's also about, as this woman mentioned, when I had children and my life deepened in that way. And also, strangely, about both the pain and the beauty of something like a loss. The very sort of poignant beauty of seeing the basic human condition, of seeing somebody suffer bravely and die. That came with great sorrow, but also with a sense of gratitude for that time that you have with the person and for the sort of sacredness and stillness by the bedside there in the hospital. So this is all to say that when I called the book All the Beauty in the World, I wanted the reader to not understand exactly what that meant, because there's so much beauty and it takes such different forms. And I wanted there to be a sense that, I, the character in the book, was sort of grappling with these different levels of beauty. Because one thing that I do in the book is I'm a guard who has a very simple job, whose hands are clean and who just spends their day with their head up looking at beautiful objects in an art museum. But then through the course of the book, I also have children, and as she mentioned, I'm at home, doing the laundry and trying to deal with the chaos of life. But there's an element of that gives life depth and meaning and purpose, and that is part of the beautiful structure of life as well. So I don't think there's one definite answer of what beauty is. I think in some ways it really is only defined by our response to it. As I was saying earlier, you kind of know when something's beautiful because it somehow opens up a channel in you. You somehow feel like you're filled with something that is beyond the sort of basic, ordinary, disposable part of life. And I think that can be found in strange places that you don't necessarily expect.
Other question?
Could you recommend about five? Could you recommend five art pieces that you pick that you're going to meet tomorrow? Could you give us any recommendation about five pieces that we should not miss?
Sure.
That's the selection of 5.
I know, let me think.
For the Korean audience.
Yeah, I think the first thing to do, this is not a direct answer to your question, but I think the first thing to do is just get lost. The place is so big that you don't want to immediately just try to look at one thing. You want to soak it all in. You want to have the experience of you're walking from Greece and then suddenly you're in Africa and suddenly you're in the modern arts and looking at Picasso's. Because it just reminds you how big the world is and how full and how diverse, and just quiet your mind and feel like you're lying on the grass looking up at the nighttime stars, that you're just small in this world that's so large and so wondrous. So I recommend that. And then, I don't know, let's think of pieces from various sections. If you go up into the Islamic wing, don't miss the Moroccan courtyard, which is so beautiful, which the Met commissioned to be built there. So it was built by these master craftsmen from Morocco, who we used to see wearing their fezzes, smoking cigarettes outside, and then they would go in and just create in plasterwork the most unbelievable sort of dedication to God in an old medieval style. I'd recommend that. I'd recommend in the African section that just reopened, there's this famous, what's called the Idia mask, which is this ivory carving from Benin in West Africa of the Ioba, the queen mother of Benin from the 16th century. And it's just this master work and this sort of the highest kind of classical moment in this empire in Benin. Let's see. I always recommend in the Chinese galleries, the Chinese Scholars Garden, the Astor Court. It's a Ming Dynasty Scholars Garden, and it feels so beautiful. You're inside New York City, but you're just transported to someplace, totally else. I love the old master paintings. Our little Fra Angelico is actually on loan, so you can't see that. And you can't see the Bruegel, the Harvesters, that's out on loan too right now. But there's plenty to see. The Titians, the Venus and Adonis by Titian is one of my absolute favorites. The Rembrandt self-portrait that he did when he was relatively old and he was bankrupt and he had lost everything. But he still had the courage to sort of look in the mirror every day and paint his face with this incredible honesty. I don't know what I'm missing. The Temple of Dender, the big temple in ancient Egypt. the Met transported this whole 800-ton temple there and then built a building around it is just, I don't know, something that's wonderful. But I'm sure I'm missing a million things, obviously.
You made a good answer.
I made a good answer? Okay, good.
Mention about the old masters in European paintings, the Titian's, which were Venus?
The Titian, Venus, and Adonis.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I got it. Adonis, the
Yeah.
hunter.
Yes.
I love the room because the look, all the Venus.
Yes.
그런 작품을 가서 보시기 바랍니다. And what else?
Oh, thank you.